Welcome to the Prevention Collaborative's Conversation podcasts. In these episodes, our staff and partners will cover the most pressing issues relevant to the violence prevention field. Our discussions cover a wide range of topics, including feminism, poor mental health, sustainable funding, and much more. Stay informed and inspired within the prevention of violence against women and children space. Start listening to join the conversation today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Heise, and I'm the Technical Director of the Prevention Collaborative. Welcome to the next installment of our conversation series. Today, we'll be talking about our Investing Wisely initiative with Joy Watson, a Senior Associate at the Prevention Collaborative. Hi, Joy. Why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about what we mean by investing wisely?
Investing wisely essentially is thinking about the money going to work on preventing violence against women and children, and really kind of reflecting on how this money is being dispersed, where it's going, how it's being used, what are the relationships between the different stakeholders involved, and to think about how some of these dynamics impact on how violence prevention programming is being done. So within this initiative, we look, for example, at things like, and looking at it in a context where money is flowing largely from the global north to the global south, looking at the relationships, for example, between funders and implementing partners, sometimes with intermediaries as well, looking at how funder practices and procedures and policies impacts how money is being utilized, and how, importantly, the connection between all of that and how programming happens on the ground. And really, we wanted to think about what are the expectations about programming, what are the understandings of what effective programming looks like, and how we put resources into this.
One of the reasons we're doing this now and how we see this project paralleling and complementing the work that has been going on to focus on raising more money for violence against women prevention and more money for women's rights organizations and feminist movements is that there's this stream of funding that comes through international development and humanitarian investments. So development cooperation, as you said, Joy, between North and South. And those sums of money are huge. And they're very, very complicated, as you note. And what happens is that by the time the money gets through all the various different layers of organizations, the people on the front line, the organizations who are actually working on prevention, are in effect just a little cog in this big delivery chain of contracts and subcontracts. And a lot of the rules that are imposed through this system really get in the way of making good decisions. So we want to really focus on the piece of it that's, yes, we need more money, but we need to make sure that the money that we are spending is actually having impact and actually, potentially not putting women at risk, which I think I've seen in some programs where decisions to cut back on certain kinds of services or things have really compromised, I think, the safety of programming. Maybe you could say just a bit about how we're going about doing this, given that a lot of what we try to do is gather evidence and then use it for advocacy.
We have agreed that what is very important in the broader field is to have a series of conversations, that there are different stakeholders doing this work, and more so sort of in, we've seen this kind of emerging in the recent past, and how do we, kind of amplify initiatives like the accelerator and kind of bring role players together to build strategy in the field in thinking about how to use the resources we have more I don't want to say more effectively, but how to think carefully about how resources are being deployed and invested and utilized, and the relationships underpinning all of that. I mean, we've also been talking about how to best case, and I know that we've kind of played with this word, case studies, that we are wanting to gather stories and practical examples of situations where there's been best practice in terms of how money's been used and the relationships have worked out well. And we've seen really good, effective programming. So I think that what we found a little bit harder, not that they don't exist, is about being able to find safe spaces to talk about where things don't work. And that's, of course, a lot harder to talk about because no one wants to talk about, essentially, I guess, when things go very wrong and they detract from effective programming. And I guess that in all of this, what we're wanting to see is the building of an advocacy agenda that we can talk about. I guess, Laurie, what I was thinking about, that you have all this experience in kind of following the historical trajectory of this work. What is our role? What is the role of the broader field? Maybe some of your thoughts on that.
We've been inspired by seeing the work that AWID and the Count Me In consortium and some of the groups Shake the Table, who have really focused attention on the needs of women's rights organizations and feminist movements, and have really been quite successful when you look at attracting more and better funding to support those groups. But that is only one part of the funding ecosystem for violence prevention. And so I think it's now important for us to look at other parts of the ecosystem, right? So where money is also being invested, not necessarily through women's funds or feminist groups, but where big sums of money are being invested. And we talk about them at conferences and in the hallways and on Zoom calls, but they very seldom trickle up to the donors and to those who are in a position to change things. So that's our goal here, is to collect the examples, use them to inform developing a strategy, and invite many, many others to add their stories and ideas so that we can really try to make some changes in expectations in these projects that will really translate into improving violence prevention work.
I guess that this is the point at which we kind of put the call out to say that as we are kind of harnessing our energy and working on the Investing Wisely initiative, that we really are interested in talking to stakeholders who've worked in prevention and violence prevention programming, whether it's at the level of being an implementing partner, as a multilateral, as a funder, to elicit what the experiences have been and what the stories are, and to kind of collate that evidence. That we also have a survey that we will be sending out to speak to people's experiences, to help us understand and kind of paint in that picture. What do you think are the gaps in the information more broadly that we might have challenges with, and how we'll deal with that?
Well, I think the information and the stories are there. It's creating an environment in a way where people can share them, where they don't feel like it jeopardizes either their organization or future funding. So, we're going to do two things. We're doing in-depth case studies ourselves, and they may, depending, be on the individual case, they may be anonymized. And, we might not talk about a specific project in a specific country, but talk about, a large collaboration between a UN agency and 6 implementing organizations in an Asian country, for example. because it's really not, this is not an exercise to point fingers. It's really an exercise to surface problems that we can need to collectively work on. And then as you mentioned, Joy, this survey, which I think we'll put a link in the show notes of the podcast where you can participate. And that's really to get a sense of the various different challenges that people have said. How commonly do people encounter them? And then to the extent that they have encountered a certain issue, to what extent, how important has it been in terms of affecting the future and the impact of the project? So it's to give us a little bit of quantitative sense of relative priorities as we go into broadening the conversation about what we might be able to do about this.
It's going to be very exciting to kind of generate more data and kind of piece it all together to see what the broader story might tell us.
Well, I think what we really want is we're all both committed to mobilizing new money, but we want to make sure that the money that we have is investing wisely, as we said, to yield safety and reduce violence for women and their children.